The world is dominated by the Abrahamic belief system. It's in virtually every government, in most religions. Really, it was the Catholic Church that started Islam. Because the problem is that the way it was going, it was so heavily sided with the Judaic point of view, and that's what it was, Christianism, because there's a lot of validation, for instance, that Yahweh, Jehovah, had no power outside the boundaries that were given in the book of Genesis, particularly Genesis 9 and 10, where he gives Abraham this inheritance. And if you study the Old Testament, you will find out that Yahweh had no power outside the boundaries of what would be considered Israel. And when you look at this from that point of view, it's interesting because, again, you have the Egyptian pathos of their gods, the Greeks, the Romans. And if you study the battles, it seemed like Yahweh, Jehovah, was not allowed to go beyond the borders of Judea. The Hebrew point of view, there's 72 different names of God, each meaning a different aspect or personality side of God. Isn't that a multiple personality disorder? Isn't that what they call that? Anyway, I digress. They believed in an evil adversary. Now, I can't validate this. I know that in primitive cultures, they would interpret storms that would destroy crops as a bad omen, things of nature, because they directly impacted the survival of that group of human beings. But anyway, this person writes that an evil adversary, whom we call Satan, because he tried to interfere with God's creation and with his creatures which inhabit the earth. Well, this implies that this creature, Satan, was a very powerful being. And if this God was omnipotent, omnipresent, and all-knowing in its construct, then you have to say it's playing the game. And then again, this is implying that this God, G-O-D, capital G-O-D, he apparently, he can't be perfect. You see, it's a problem in that if his creation, his heaven, is perfect, it's impossible for imperfection to arrive or even to originate out of perfection. Lucifer and God are in the business of collecting souls. So he says, carrying this theory to its logical conclusion, it would seem reasonable to suppose that God intended to place human beings on earth by a method of birth that prevented their having knowledge of other worlds beyond what he decided to reveal to our first parents personally and to future generations through his prophets and the scriptures. Does this sound like a freaking trap to you? It's like going into Vegas and you play a game of Baccarat and you don't have a freaking clue what the cards mean. You have no idea of what the currency means, only what they're going to tell you. So he's walking with Adam and Eve, and in many books he raped Eve, but this is not neither there, talking with them and explaining to them his holy will and his plan for the rule of the universe, which he wanted to be established on earth first. I mean, that's just got freaking alien crap all over it. I mean, you could then look at the Bible as simply as a war plan. This is a war strategy of how to take over a planet, all living, sentient, intelligent life, and then how to spread it out. What was it that the Jesus said? Go ye into all the world and spread this crap? That's a takeover, ladies and gentlemen. It's a hostile takeover, by the way. Now look at what we just read in the Quran. He said he promised that if they respected his wishes and obeyed his commandments, they would, after a period of trial, rejoin him in heaven and live forever in perfect happiness. Now, define for me what perfect is and perfect happiness. What exactly is that? Because what I have found in life, that if you feed a person and basically give in to everything that they have desire or want for, eventually they die. There's something about the merit of a spirit struggling. I would agree with that. We seem to test ourselves all the time because it's not healthy, nor is it good for our progress to be fully satisfied or fully happy all the time. That leads to contempt. So that's like the Quran. You must obey the commandments. Now, it's really interesting about this deity because everyone is familiar with the 10 commandments. But isn't it odd that this same God, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, God of the Quran, it's the same one, he commanded his followers to kill other humans. But yet in his commandments, he says, thou shalt not kill. He just forgot to put the little ask you there, but only when I tell you to. See, this to me, it begins to bring this out. So, all right, so am I dealing now? I mean, to me, I interpret that as evil. You tell me not to kill, that it's against your laws, and you're a perfected God, but yet you just commanded these people to go and completely wipe this whole tribe, this village out. And then you commanded them to cut the babies out of the mother's wombs and then take the fetuses and slam their heads upon the rock. How do you get Jesus out of that? That to me sounds really evil. You feel like you're in a Ponzi scheme here? That God's angels were made up of many choirs of varying degree, and that angels of lesser degree advance from one heaven to the other. You know that's implying, don't you? And we're the angels. And also intended that those on a lower plane could, by application, diligence, and attention to spiritual matters, advance themselves to higher levels on earth and higher degrees in heaven. This is what rugged individualism really means. The rugged individualism is what the enemies of God are determined to destroy. But wait a minute, you just told me that I would be in perfect happiness. That doesn't work for us. Obviously, human beings can and do deteriorate spiritually until they reach the stage that they are engulfed in hell. This line of thought would offer some explanation to the reference made to limbo, purgatory, and the fact that Christ, after his resurrection, descended into some part of hell where he released souls who were waiting for their redemption. Now, this gets into some really twisted stuff because you got to ask yourself, well, what were the souls down there for? How did those souls get out? And yet you're putting new souls in there. I mean, yeah, it gets really weird. So it says every living soul knows that God did give us an intellect and an unrestricted use of our wills. Well, let me just caveat that. If you are God and you give me free will, you don't have a bitch in what I do or say. I have free will. Because if you put restrictions upon my free will, or i.e. consequences, I never had free will to begin with. I had an illusion. I was a servant tricked into thinking that I had a choice. In the end, I never had a choice at all. If God hadn't intended to put us to a test, there would have been no sense in his allowing an adversary to oppress his plans, ridicule his wishes, and try to wean us away from God so that we would be possessed by Lucifer, the king of the empire of darkness, whom we commonly call the devil. You see, this is doublespeak. This is witchcraft. Because what this guy is saying here is that this God, this perfected God, created evil. He's got it on the leash, but when he lets loose to oppress you, well then, I can take you to the scriptures, and it said, in the beginning was darkness. So by implication here, this God is attacking an existing kingdom that it had no part in, because it wants to bring in light. Now, if you read the Bronze Book, the Colburn Bible, you find out in one of the creation stories that the original life forms here basically grew up in the light of Saturn. Saturn gave off a golden light. It was very dim. And there was life that flourished. And then, by their description, God came in. And when he created light, it killed all the life on the planet. And new life had to be created. And even today, the light of our sun, although it helps in the photosynthesis, etc., is still harmful to life. It'll give you cancer. Weird. All right. So, oh boy. All right, so he talks about how some theologians believe that the fallen angels lusted for the people of this world. Augustine claimed that the perverted and deprived interpretations of sexual relations adopted by the human race at the instigation of Satan are contrary to God's purposes and intention. The problem is, I can't find anywhere in the Bible that tells me how to have intercourse with a woman. To tell me anything. Wouldn't know exactly how to even go about it if I stay strictly with the book. Now, I have read in the Apocrypha, the pseudo-Apocrypha, the book of Adam and Eve, the book of Adam. And in there, it was actually, depending on how you want to title the person, Lucifer or Satan, Lucifer taught Adam how to have sex with Eve. Because Adam's point was, and as y'all go back and look at the video, was the fact that Adam said, well, now wait a minute. Wouldn't that be having sex with myself? Because she came out of me. How is that supposed to work? And in the book of Adam, we know that it took years for Lucifer, the angels, however you want to use the term, to finally persuade Adam to know his wife. Well, she wasn't his wife, but, you get my idea. This is weird, isn't it? And so now it says the study of opinions expressed by the Catholics and non-Catholics provide evidence which supports the reasoning set forth that we find several make reference to the fact that Lucifer and his fallen expressed the lustful desire to have sexual relations with and physical control over the bodies of human beings. What's going on here? Because if humans were not that adapt to the procreation process, it means there's a lot of screwing going on up in heaven. That these beings must be screwing their freaking brains out all the time. Because if this is the only thing they brought down with them initially, and then it begs the question, so wait a minute, I thought angels were hermaphrodites. So, I mean, folks, this gets weird when you start extrapolating this out. And how they have so well pinned this down to one of the very biggest parts of our ability to control creation. So they took it away from us. Apparently, angels have sex, which implies that demons must be having sex too. My namesake relative in the Liber Lilith, that was his whole goal. Carl wanted to have coitus with Lilith. It gets into the question, can spirits and human beings in the physical flesh have sexual relations with one another? Just to tell you, the answer is yes. I would not advise it, but yes, you're hooking up to a whole different energy source, which will short things out. But, if that's your goal, have at it. So anyway, so now we get into this point where the adversary Satan, in which that is actually the true definition, Satan is not a physical being, it actually means adversary. He caused Eve to defect from God. She afterwards persuades Adam to join her in the rebellion. Now, in some books, it's where here that Satan and Eve had sex, because Cain was not of Adam's bloodline. It is jacked with us from the very beginning. We've got Satan coming in here. He's seduced Eve. That's the word beguiled. Beguiled means to be sexually possessed. It means to be completely overtaken. So if Satan beguiled Eve, well, she was no virgin when Adam got to know her, that was for sure. So now by perversion of sex, we mean that Satan taught Eve how to use sexual relations to gratify animal passions and carnal desires. Well, that's just admitting exactly what I just said to you. So by this, we can say that Lucifer taught Eve how to masturbate, and that she must in turn must have taught Adam. I mean, this all had to start somewhere, folks. When are we going to grow up? If the story is even true, we can say that there's maybe elements of truth within it. I don't know. So now this is considered Luciferian, because the Luciferian conspiracy would indicate that God intended sexual intercourse to be a holy union between a man and his wife, entered into for the only purpose of allowing God to create and infuse a soul. So now you see, and it goes on for page after page into this whole thing that started with if Satan or Lucifer is in fact of a spirit origin, then this confirms that these first copulation of a spirit and a physical human being was apparently not only possible, but probably the norm. All the gods love having sex.